All right, this is part 2 of our 401 series concerning equipping the saints, or raising up volunteer ministers, and even raising up leaders that you'll oversee that themselves raise up volunteer leaders, so leaders of leaders even. One of the key concepts in equipping saints for ministry is a concept that was laid out several years ago by a couple of different people, just to try to help people understand the difference between somebody who does ministry and somebody who trains people to do ministry. So the difference between just a primary caregiving minister versus a minister who's equipping other people to do ministry or primary care. So one person used the terminology of ranchers and shepherds years ago. This is actually taken from the perspective of a leader or a rancher, and it's not from the perspective so much of a shepherd. Now, it's important to say this because I'm going to give some characteristics of a shepherd that are cast in sort of a negative light. That does not mean that we don't need shepherds, all right? We need people who are primary caregivers. These people will be individuals who probably have strong mercy and servant gifts. And when they minister to an individual, that individual will feel loved, they'll feel cared for. They might make excellent one-on-one counselors. And so every area of ministry is going to need good shepherds that they've raised up into the ministry and that are doing this kind of ministry. So what we're talking about right now is, if you're a pastor, if you're a leader in this context, here's the things that you need to be aware of that can work against you becoming a good rancher or a good leader. I just want to tell you a quick story. I had a friend who actually pastors a church out in Colorado. He went there several years ago. He's still pastoring this church. And the church has always been about 100 to 200 people in size. It kind of goes up a little ways and comes down a little ways, goes up a little ways, comes down a little way. And he was a little bit frustrated because he's been there about 25 years. And he knew that our church had been steadily growing, and he was just asking me how I had continued to grow the church. And so I actually didn't answer him right off the bat, but I just started asking him a bunch of questions about how he spends his time. What kind of roles does he play in the church? So as I talked to the guy, I realized that he was really good at a lot of things. For example, he's a good singer. He can play guitar. He can play keyboards. He's a good preacher. He's a great people person. He's a good counselor. He's got great people skills. He can actually fix cars, and he can build houses. I began to ask him about one of his typical weeks, and he would at times be wearing the hat of a worship pastor, at times be wearing the hat of a counselor, at times be wearing the hat of the preacher and leader of the congregation. He also, within that same week, helped fix somebody's car. He helped move somebody into their house, and he did a number of other things that were very hands-on in terms of his caregiving. And the thing is he did all of them really, really well. And I looked at him and I said, Mike, your problem is you're too good. You're good at too many things. I said, I can really only do 2 things really well, and then everything else I have to get somebody else to do. Now, there's a little bit of wisdom in that. I had a mentor of mine one time say this to me, Fred, I'm not very good at much. He says, I just find people who are. Well, the idea behind this is if you want a ministry that can only reach people that you have time to reach, then you're going to function out of the shepherd model. But that ministry will be limited to only the people that you can personally minister to by yourself, all right? But if you want that ministry to expand and multiply, then you're going to have to learn ranching techniques or leadership techniques, all right? So you want to become good at just a few things and then raise a ton of people up that are great at a lot of things, is the kind of the key concept here. So shepherds, 10 characteristics. Number 1, shepherds are primary caregivers. Somebody has a crisis, somebody has a problem, this person is going to show up and give personal ministry to a person one-on-one. Number 2, many times shepherds have overestimated their own significance. In other words, if I don't show up and do the ministry, it won't be done very well. I'm sort of the best caregiver there is. I'm the best caregiver around, and so if I don't show up and give the care, it won't be given in a quality way. Number 3, there is an expectation drivenness. In other words, when people have an expectation on a shepherd, the shepherd shows up. The shepherd tries to meet everybody's expectations. So, for example, my friend Mike, he would help fix people's cars. He would help move them into their houses. He would help them with construction projects. He would help them with counseling. He would show up at funerals and weddings and he tried to do everything. So every time somebody had an expectation, he tried to meet that expectation. So he was driven to meet people's expectations. Number 4 is availability. Shepherds are available 24/7. If you're inclined to be a shepherd to people, then they can pretty much call you morning, noon, or night, and you will show up immediately and be there for them. Number 5, performance-oriented. Watch me make them feel good. Watch me affirm them. Watch me love them. Watch me help them. Watch me fix them. All right? Number 6 is role comfort. They limit the vision because, quite frankly, when you live like this, you're running around all the time doing primary care, and you're tired. I can tell you that if you have 50 people and you try to give primary care to all 50 people can wear you out 7 days a week. I've pastored a church of 2, I've pastored a church of 25, I've pastored a church of 50, I've pastored a church of 1,000 and 2,000, but I can tell you that if you try to do all the primary care for 50 to 100 people, you're going to wear yourself out. By the way, I think one of the reasons why the average size church in America is 75 people is because that's about what one person can care for adequately. Sometimes you have some people that are super highly driven, motivated, and energetic. I had one pastor friend who functioned as a primary caregiver for a congregation of 300 to 400 people. He knew every name. He visited every person that ever went to the hospital. He did every wedding. He did every funeral. He had an amazing capacity to give primary care to up to 300 people. But most people only have that capacity up to about 75 to 100, maybe 200. So in church training, we oftentimes talk about the 200 barrier because that's sort of just an average number of when people max out on the number of people that they can personally minister to. All right, number 7, poor delegating skills. They think they've got to show up and do it. Nobody else can do it as well, and so they just don't recruit and train and develop people into ministry. Number 8 is poor planning. People are always going from one crisis to the next expectation, to the next expectation, and they just don't take time to plan. So they don't think 1 year down the road, they don't think 2 years down the road, they don't think 5 years down the road. They don't take the time to put into their schedule key activities that will help them grow the ministry, grow leadership. They're just tired. They're running from person to person, meeting individual needs. Number 9, individualism. They see the church as individuals to be ministered to. They don't see the church as leaders overseeing groups of people. And then number 10, shepherds tend to be sort of tuned out to trends. So whatever happening in the culture, a lot of times their ministry is so oriented around caregiving, which really doesn't change that much. I mean, people need to be cared for in certain ways. You need to show up, you need to love them, you need to pray for them, you need to listen to them. They need that primary kind of care. So if you've based your whole ministry on that, then bigger trends that affect bigger picture kinds of things in church life are ignored. All right, so those are 10 characteristics of shepherds. Next, 10 characteristics of ranchers. Number 1, ranchers have an emphasis on the big picture. They see ministry in big screen and down the road, and they see lots of ministry. So they have a big picture. Number 2, ranchers have a take charge competence. They have a level of skill that they're competent in. They believe that they can lead. They know where they're going, and they can take people there along the way. Number 3, there's a one another ministry expectation. So I expect everybody in my church that ever ends up in the hospital to be visited, but I personally visit very few of those people. But my pastors visit people. Sometimes I'll visit people. We have a bunch of lay people that visit people. There's an expectation that if somebody in the church visits you, that's as good as anybody else visiting you. So I like to tell people that I'm not really that great at certain things, but I know somebody that's awesome at this. So there's a little bit of strategic ignorance or even strategic sort of writing yourself out of the picture, because you want to raise other people up and build a one another expectation. Number 4 is group focus. You see people in larger group settings, leaders who are overseeing leaders, who are overseeing groups of ministry. And so there's a big group focus, and there's lots of groups, and there's lots of ministry going on. Number 5, flexible supervision. The ranchers typically aren't accused of micromanaging. So they're not excessive control freaks trying to manage down to the smallest level. Number 6, outcome objectives. I like to say in the business world we call it MBO, management by objective. So when I raise a person up and they have a skill set and they see the vision, how they achieve their objectives isn't as important to me as them achieving the objectives. They might have a different route there. I'm not trying to manage every little step of the way. Number 7, large picture focus evaluates personal tasks in relation to the big picture. So a rancher will constantly be thinking through, what is my biggest, most important contribution to the big picture? They'll focus their time and energy around those things, and they're raising up everybody else to do all the other stuff. All right, number 8, role creation. Ranchers don't get tired, and their vision doesn't really hit limits. There are constantly opportunities for more ministry, more vision, more people. There's always room for more in a big picture rancher type person. Number 9, non-dependence, training people to function without a pastor. That you actually build the confidence that they're awesome ministers. They can do it better than even the pastors. We train you and bring you to a place, but then there's many times when those people way exceed the gifting of the pastor. And that's okay. That's okay with a rancher. You're not threatened by other people whose giftings might be better than yours. That's a win for everybody. Number 10 then is managerial skills. Big picture ranchers take time for planning, take time for prayer, take time for thinking. Then everything flows and works out of sort of strategic orientation. So this is sort of a big swoop on this whole idea between ranchers and shepherds and some of the core components that go into becoming a great rancher, a great leader, or as in 401 terminology, a great leader of leaders. And so you're going to be going into a ministry interactive time, and I'd be curious as you guys talk, how many of you orient yourself more toward the shepherding model naturally, or how many of you orient more toward the ranching model? Talk about that. And how much do you think you can grow in the area of ranching or leading? God bless you. Enjoy your ministry interaction time.